So, who is the New Paradigm Centre for? Now, this is a good question. Those of us who are in the business of health seem to have a very intense, innate drive to help and heal people, often because of some sort of experience in our own lives. That notion that we have learned how to do something which might mean that other people don't need to go through some of the difficulties that we have been through ourselves. So we often feel like if we can put our hands out and lead or guide somebody along a path that we've already trodden alongside somebody, that we can perhaps save somebody some of the trials that we had ourselves. So the challenge with this is that sometimes we feel like we want to be able to help absolutely everybody, and that would be lovely, and maybe that's true. Maybe we could help everybody in some way, but most of us are solo or have just very small teams of one other person or one or two people around us that we can draw on. So helping and healing everybody is just not possible for one person or a very tiny group of people. So we have to be a little bit more precise. And in actual fact, I would suggest that the New Paradigm Centre approach is not for everybody for a whole range of reasons. So when I was thinking about answering this question, I thought a little bit about my own healing journey. And it goes a bit like this, in that I very, very early on knew that the medical approach didn't suit me. It's not how I wanted to progress with my healing journey, and to all intents and purposes it actually hindered my healing progress. It made me very unwell in lots and lots of ways, and the drugs that I was given had a very harmful effect on my body as well as my mind, which might seem like a complete oxymoron, since the drugs were given to me to supposedly heal or cure an emotional health problem that I had been diagnosed with. But as I am a complete nerd and I like to research and I like to find things out, I very quickly discovered that there was very little evidence in support of the drugs that I was taking. And in fact, the research that was coming out was showing that to a greater extent, these drugs were doing more harm than good to a vast number of people. And one of these things, doing a quick recce of people that I knew and know who have taken or are taking drugs for, things like depression, or some of the labels that they're given, like bipolar disorder or schizophrenia, or things like that. If you do a quick recce of the people that you know taking antidepressant drugs, antipsychotic drugs, mood stabilizers, whatever they are, you will very quickly discover one thing at least. And the main thing you will discover is that they are not cured. Okay? You will discover that these people are still struggling day in, day out in their lives, and then often they have an additional challenge in that the drugs produce such crippling adverse effects that they have to take drugs to combat the adverse effects, which then also have adverse effects, and then inevitably people end up on a great big long list of prescription drugs, because quite often what happens is a drug can cause an adverse effect. Another drug is prescribed to supposedly be an antidote to that adverse effect, and then other symptoms are produced, which are then labelled as another health condition, and more drugs, and so on and so on and so on and so on. And quite often we end up being very bogged down in our system with what we now know are neurotoxins. That means they're toxic to our brain, as well as toxic to other parts of our body. So I constantly had to have my liver monitored, my kidneys monitored, my heart monitored. I ended up having quite a serious heart condition that was caused by the psychiatric drugs, and I have a letter from the cardiologist still to prove that it was caused by the psychiatric drugs, which righted itself once I came off the drugs, thankfully. Because when it first came on, I was just before I was planning to come off the drugs, and the cardiologist supported me whilst I was coming off the drugs, along with my GP, and stopped me having heart surgery until I'd come off the drugs, and I made that agreement with him, and thankfully the condition righted itself. So over the years I have done a lot of my own research. I also trained in lots of different health fields, so I'm a psychologist now. I've trained in counselling, I'm a peer coach, I trained in the NHS, I trained at universities, I've trained in all sorts of other healing modalities and complementary medicines as well. And so I tend to combine all of those different approaches, and I continue to research day in, day out. And that's how it's been for the last 10 years. So when I took a look at my own healing journey, I put in a lot of hard work and effort. I read and I researched everything. I questioned everything. I never just took some advice from somebody, whether they had a million letters after their name or not. I simply heard what they had to say, I went off, I found out about it, and then I started to make my own decisions. I found one or two people who were very supportive of me. In the first instance, actually, it was my GP who helped me to come off the psychiatric drugs, which took 2 years, and it must be done very, very slowly. That's the only disclaimer that I will make, is that you cannot come off psychiatric drugs alone or quickly. You have to find some help with it. And there are now, these days, quite a lot of places where you can go for information, and there are a lot of psychiatric reformers working to help people to come off the drugs, because even psychiatry is starting to realise the harm that some of these drugs can do, or all of the drugs can do, because they are mind mood altering substances, no different to recreational drugs. So that was one thing. The other thing was that I had to make my getting back into alignment with health a priority. And that meant that I also had to invest in my healing and in my education, okay? And to put it into context, I had to do that whilst periodically having no salary at all, periodically having a very small salary and supporting 3 teenagers, well, at the time, supporting 3 small children as a single parent on a very small salary. I then started to set up my own business, at which point I was supporting slightly older children with even less money, because it takes quite a long time in business before you actually make a profit. Sometimes for a very short period of time I was only on benefits whilst I was setting up my business. And then, you know, for the first few years it was very, very hard work trying to get by without money coming in. So when people say to me, I can't afford to spend money on my health, what that actually says to me is I'm not prepared to spend the money that I have on my health. It's to do with priorities, and it's nothing to do with finances, okay? So I had to be very, very creative with my finances. If I wanted to do a course, I would find out how much it was and I would save up the little bit of money that I had. It meant that I stopped smoking, okay? Because it was, you know, using up money that I really preferred to use elsewhere. So I often feel nowadays what's a packet of cigarettes can be £12 a packet, and if you're smoking one packet a day or even one packet every other day, that's between, you know, £60 and £80 a week, okay, which could potentially buy you 1 or 2 coaching sessions, peer coaching sessions, and go a long way after only 4 weeks to paying for an entire healing or personal development program. Okay, so I take quite a hard line on this. So if people aren't willing to invest in their health, then they're not ready to take on the kind of work that is needed to get back into alignment with health. Okay, so that's the first thing. So aside from that, as I say, I studied an awful lot. So when I went back to work, after I had trained in the NHS and I went back to work, I was working 40 miles away from home. So I'd have an 80-mile round trip. I was out of the house for 12 hours, 5 days a week. Then I was studying for my psychology degree, so I had to study all weekend. Then I studied for other things, which meant I had to go to classes in the evening after work. You know, so it was tough. It was hard work. Now, the thing is that I now have all of that in my brain. Yeah, I've put it together, I've juggled it around, I've researched, I've created new things. So it's kind of all there on a plate for you. All you have to do is to follow the programs, take information from the short courses, download some of the worksheets or the ebooks, fill them in and do your own work that way. I can give you a list of books and courses by other people to do as well. That might be helpful. People to follow on social media, groups to go to, all of those sorts of things. So I've done all the donkey work for you, and that's fine, okay? So to answer the question, who is it for? It's primarily for those who are experiencing some form of emotional distress. Now, you may have been given a mental health diagnosis. You may have been given mental health drugs of some description. Or you may be suffering emotionally and feel quite distressed and upset from time to time, but you haven't yet been given a diagnosis or a label of some kind, but you know that life isn't satisfying for you. You're not fulfilling your potential. You're not going where you want to go in life. and, you know, achieving all of your aspirations. So that's one thing. It's also for those who are experiencing some chronic health conditions, such as fibromyalgia, for example, things like rheumatoid arthritis, things like irritable bowel syndrome, things like inflammatory bowel disease, things like asthma, any kind of chronic pain, chronic fatigue, ME, things like that, and also people who are experiencing a tough time going through perimenopause, things like that. The list is actually endless, and you will have seen in one of my pages and one of my blogs on trauma and stress that we now know that most, if not all, physical health conditions actually have their roots in stress and trauma of some kind. And there's a very interesting field called psychoneuroimmunoendocrinology that's putting together all of those systems to show that because stress suppresses our immune system and messes up our hormones and everything else, that this is what actually causes disease of all kinds. So you might already have some kind of sense or intuition that what you are experiencing has its root in stress. And some of those things I just listed there, particularly things like fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue, pain, irritable bowel syndrome, have so much evidence to suggest that basically your central nervous system is permanently switched on to survival mode. And so there is so much that we can do to calm that central nervous system back down, get our body back online, doing the things that enable it to function better. And indeed, I've experienced some of those health conditions myself, which I continue to research and to find ways to feel better and get back into alignment. So it's also for those, as I kind of said already, who are willing to do whatever it takes to get well. Okay, you're willing to put in the effort, you're willing to commit to a program of recovery, you're willing to commit to the process of getting back into alignment with your body and your mind, and what I tend to call the mind-body now, since they can't be separated. Okay, so you're willing to do whatever it takes to feel better. And even when I have really low patches, there is an eternal optimist in me and an eternal sense of hope, in that I know that at some point things will change for the better. And right now, during this period of lockdown in the UK, it's really important that we can embrace some of that hope and optimism. And, you know, admittedly, we don't always feel like that. And that's where it's really important to have someone to partner with in our health, someone to help us along, a peer who has been there before. And you know, and that becomes then a mutual exchange of support and care for each other. So it's also for those who are willing to let go of the medical model and also the recovery model, and to embrace the purposeful health model wholeheartedly. Okay, so if you are someone who is very, very attached to your diagnosis for whatever reason, then possibly this way of working is not for you right now. It might be one day, but right now, if you are somebody who is absolutely sure that you have some entity that has come in and affected you and caused a medical health condition, then maybe it's not the right time for you to come along to the New Paradigm Centre. There's nothing to stop you listening to some of the videos or being part of the group perhaps, but the point is that we're not in the medical model anymore. We're not in the recovery model anymore. Here we're embracing the purposeful health model, and that means we're going to deconstruct some of those things that have kept us stuck in that way of thinking and the limits of a label. So you have to be prepared in this program to let go of old ways of thinking and allow some new ways of thinking, some new ideas, some new concepts, new behaviours. And I'm not saying that it's not going to be a challenge for you, and I will challenge you, okay? But that's the deal, all right? Because we can continue doing the same things that we've already done, but nothing will change. If you really want to stay with that medical approach, then there is a huge, massive system out there already for you. It's all set up, it's free usually. Anything that the NHS provides will give you that medical model. Sometimes it might attempt to give you a recovery model, but ultimately the recovery and the medical models are still very much intertwined with each other. In fact, I would go so far as to say that the recovery model has stepped backwards in time quite a bit, and that may well be due to pressure from the pharmaceutical industry to kind of stick with the medical model. So ultimately, it's for those people who are willing to prioritise and invest in their health, okay? And that means investing their time, investing their effort, investing some money, and investing their hope and their energy into a completely new and different way of thinking about things than maybe you are used to, okay? Now, I appreciate that some people, as I myself have been, may be experiencing financial hardship. Financial hardship has hit me again during this particular period of time, because the work that I was doing to bring in income whilst I've been doing my research and everything, I'm no longer able to do. So that's been problematic for me. But has it stopped me investing in the things that I need to invest in to have continuous growth and opportunities? No, it hasn't. Maybe I've invested less, but with what little financial resources that I have available to me at the moment, I will ensure that there is always some put aside for my personal development and my health, okay? And that's really, really important. And plain fact of the matter is that right now the centre has no external funding. I may consider external funding at some point when I've built up enough evaluation and research from the progress of the centre, and I'm able to prove that it works to people. But for now, there's going to be a small to reasonable investment from yourselves in order to take part in this, because I can't live on fresh air, as I'm sure you can't either. And that's just me being really transparent and honest and frank and open with you about it, because I don't want any misunderstandings, okay? There'll be some clear pricing for things, and there may well be concessions for things for people. So It's not that there isn't some flexibility in the system, but if we can have, for example, some people who have a lot of financial resources who want to donate and provide some resources for those who might be currently less fortunate, then that's great. But equally, I find that investment is very, very important, and the word is indicative of that as well, because I know from my experiences of working in the NHS and from working in the charity sector that, and from my own experiences of investing in things, that if I have paid for something, I am more likely to commit to it, and I'm more likely to value it as something which is going to be important for me to follow through in my life. And that is another reason for things. Even if people can only make a very small donation to something, I feel that that ability to invest something is very, very important. It also is part of your own building of self-esteem, that feeling that you have taken some responsibility and you have provided for yourself means that you are now prioritizing yourself and valuing yourself as important enough to invest in yourself for your future and for your health. And I don't know about anyone else who's watching, but certainly when you have children, as I do, investing in myself and my health has been a very, very important thing for me to do for my children as well. Okay, so that's it. In short, it's for people who are experiencing emotional distress of some kind, whether that's something that they've been diagnosed with or their own sense that they're not coping so well. Those who have some kind of chronic health condition, such as fibromyalgia, chronic pain, fatigue, inflammatory bowel disease, irritable bowel syndrome, things like that. Those who are prepared to do whatever it takes to feel better. Those who are willing to let go of the recovery model and the medical model and the recovery model, and embrace purposeful health wholeheartedly. And those who are willing to prioritise and invest in their health. And if you can tick any or all of those boxes, then we're going to get along just fine, and this centre will be of help for you. Okay, thank you.